behalf of ADI Hyderabad, we welcome you to Design Stories, a series of webinar and live events aimed at discovering successful designer and engaging with them to discuss their bittersweet journeys towards being called successful. ADI is a network representing professional interests of the Indian design community, creating a meaningful interface between design professionals, people as users, the industry, education institutions, students, and policymakers. My name is Akhil Karanam. I'm the head of industry outreach at ADI Hyderabad and your host for the meeting today. Before we start today's session, we'd like all of you to take a quick poll to help us understand the demographics of the attendees better. Anshu, can you please fire up the polls?
Sure.
Please select an option and press on submit.
Akhil, can you see the results?
Sure. Sonam, can you see the results?
Yeah, I can.
Yeah. So this is our demographics for the meeting.
Great. Okay.
Yeah. So since all the attendees know briefly who today's speaker is, and since the event is called Design Stories, I thought it is only fair that we be narrated to the adventures and the heroic deeds of the design journey right from the very beginning by the protagonist himself. Sonam, you can take over from me, and for a dramatic effect, let me, in a cheesy baritone, try and give you a kickstart. Long, long ago, in the misty, beautiful land of Sikkim, a boy was born. His parents named him Sonam Tashi Galsen. Sonam went on to become a hero in the field of design and made great strides. One day, he was invited by a design Illuminati outfit called ADI Hyderabad to tell the world his marvelous tales of art, design, sustainability, and a few true stories of evil creatures like clients, payments, deadlines. And he started off by saying, yeah, so over to you, Sonam. Please introduce yourself and let us know what
Wow.
you're here
Wow, Akhil, I had no clue this was going to happen, but
for.
but yeah, thank you for the wonderful introduction. I mean, I don't know about heroic stuff, but definitely our journey has definitely had a lot of collaboration with definitely a lot of heroes and heroine in the whole journey, because the journey of design itself in India is very tough. It's been very challenging, for the past since independence. What we have done is we kind of like spread the challenges further towards the Himalayas. There weren't much, attention in terms of design integration or design in terms of investments in design that ways. So my journey started with, again, it wasn't just me. I think anything about collaborations or working in such scenarios is not one person's work. One cannot really do this thing alone. There was a lot of people who were part of this journey, but amongst them, the founders were Tenzing Ninze, Kama Palzo, Ranveer, and myself. So we kind of like were from different backgrounds, from like communications, industrial design. I myself have been trained as a industrial designer from National Institute of Design, Paldi. So I kind of like got back to Sikkim sometime around 2006, 7, due to some personal reasons. Then I just kind of like, got really fascinated with what the possibilities of starting a design studio here. So kind of like brainstorm with all my other colleagues who are working different cities. Some one was in Delhi, other was in Bangalore, Bombay. So we just kind of like got together and started the design studio in 2008 as EcoStream. So then the idea at that time was to kind of like work with different kind of government, sectors, mostly in the development areas, because I think somewhere part of this decision was also because of my late professor MP Ranjan, who kind of like somewhere was instrumental in mentoring me to kind of you know come back to Sikkim and start something here rather than finding out scopes in cities in other parts of India. Primarily because I think Ranjan knew very clearly that design really needed to really spread out nationally, to be able to have a national perspective towards design rather than having a very city perspective to design, so which is why I think I was pretty much convinced about what his vision was. So for us, it was like a little bit of a initially uh, how do you say, it wasn't really turbulent in that sense, but then it took a while for us to actually, for ourselves, to kind of like first understand exactly what we wanted to do as a design collective, so we didn't really have a vision in the beginning. We just had an intent to work together on long-term basis, all of us, in Sikkim, that was the how it all started. It's only in 2015 we started building a vision for a creative economy, mountain economy model towards the entire Indian Himalayan range, which is the 10 Indian Himalayan states and 2 Indian Union territories. So it took quite a while for us to, an experience to actually, put that vision together. So that, in short, that's the entire kind of a journey of EcoStream. But then we kind of slowly diverged into other things also, because consultancy was, we felt that with just consultancy it will never be able to make an impact to design. So we got into entrepreneurship and we got into starting enterprises, product enterprises, where we started a brand called La, where primarily we work with the craft sector and we kind of like develop products. We basically also kind of like we're building systems as to not only look at it as from a product enterprise point of view, but the systems model point of view, in the sense that how, what do you do with the wealth that the craft community is generating, the income that they're generating, how does that work out? So right from financial inclusion to, getting sorted out their long-term plans as to what they want to do with the income that they were making through crafts. So we basically started diverging into various things. Okay. So likewise, my colleagues also, we kind of like, spread out with the portfolio. Karma Salon started Kuzu, which is a textile brand, and then Tenzin started something called Tapestry, which is a souvenir brand for the Himalayas. So we kind of like started figuring out niche areas and interest areas, in terms of creating our own separate individual enterprises also, because we felt that as a consultancy, it's a all the evil monsters that you kind of described, Akhil, in your introduction. I think that was not really allowing us to sustain, well, because eventually we felt that on a long-term basis with such a huge team, and EcoStream was growing from 5 people to, almost about 30, 40 people every year. So it just could, we just couldn't like make complete use of our creative resources. So that's why we kind of started diverging into enterprise. So in short, that's my entire kind of a journey. So if there's anything else you'd want to ask. You're mute.
Sorry. Yeah. So what came across my mind when I was actually going through your profile initially was that I noticed that you have an anthropologist, an ethnographer, an architectural expert, and people from diverse areas of design and other walks of life as well in your design studio. So my question is that does it, since EcoStream is a multidisciplinary design studio, does it often distract you from focusing on a certain goal with a razor sharp vision, or does it, help you in a way to innovate better through cross-referencing or borrowing from various disciplines that you operate?
I think the multidisciplinary thing actually really works out really well for in our context at least, because SIG is a very small state.
Hmm.
And the most of the sectors that we work with, it kind of like converges in different sectors.
Hmm.
So one really does have, we really do have to have that multiple perspectives towards the solution, which is why I think at the end of the day, I think the method is not really where the focus is in that sense, but eventually, what the end goal is, the common vision is.
Right.
To reach there, so at most of the times what happens is that we start getting, as designers, we start getting an expert domain,
Right.
which we're
Exactly.
not trained to get into. Like, for example, we are the architecture and anthropologists, that ethnographers you talked about. We're not trained as conservators.
Right.
So we understand the process and value of conservation and why conservation should be done. And we understand how we can design systems around it, how you can sustain the whole activity. But we are not conservators to understand exactly the nitty-gritties of it, or we are not ethnographers to understand ethnicity or how ethnicity is built up, how
Right.
communication is. So we have to kind of like, collaborate at different junctures with different kinds of people, and that so far has been one of our strong points as a design studio, that we managed to able to, work with different kinds of, experts. So
Right.
it's not a designer's perspective into finding solutions.
Right. Right.
It's a very it's done in that very scientific manner.
Right. Yeah. So I have a question from one of the attendees here. So please hold on for a second. Yeah. So Adarsh here asks your take on the role of Indian design with respect to the Northeast and more of an international perspective also.
Okay. See, I think it's not the role of design, but it's the role of the Himalayas right now, or role of the mountains. Uh, we are just basically catalysts, or we are probably some enablers in some certain things,
Right.
But the more main thing is actually for us is more about the concern that are there, from the point of view of even if you look at globally, everyone's talking about climate change and now the global pandemic and all of that. For us in the Himalayas, it's a very sensitive thing between development and and conservation.
Conservation, yeah.
It's very sensitive, so we have to be very careful, because the impact is not only downstream nationally, but it has global thing, because the Himalayas actually are that way is so it basically looks at food security, water security, the climate aspect of things. So you have to be very careful about what kind of development you're bringing in. And design has always been there, as a thing of like, if you look at the whole industrial revolution, if you look at the entire, even in India, when Nehru started this whole thing many years in the 60s, with the industrial revolution, there was, it was very clear that, that India needed that industrial revolution
Right.
to jobs and, push the economy. But for us here in the mountains, we have to be very careful about what we are doing, because then right now we're breathing fresh air, fresh water is there, organic food, great weather, peaceful life. So we need to like, so the role is like, at the end of the day, for us as designers, is to basically have a very good balance between, conservation and development. And in this case, nowadays, what we are trying to do is that we are not keeping conservation and development as two opposite ends. We are saying that conservation is development. So conservation has economic implications, and that's what our work is all about.
Right, right. So going ahead, I wanted to ask how does the community, say in the Himalayas or in the mountainous regions there, respond to this holistic approach that you as EcoStream take? Is it only from your side because you think about it with this kind of an approach, or does the community there in general have this conscience working all the time inherently?
I think that was what attracted us, right, to come back here, because in this case, it's not that as we are leading people towards understanding these concepts. The people already understand these concepts, so we are following them. In fact, we are following a lot of community-based practices, which has been going on for years and years and years. And it's just that I think what is happening is that over the years, this practices has been going on, but I feel that there's a little bit of wear and tear that's coming, with the whole generation gap and all of that. And people are trying to understand maybe this is like very redundant or not, not needed in today's time and world, and the priorities should be somewhere else. So for us, we are just kind of like reconfirming, re-establishing those notions and those concepts, because the mountains regional, you'll find perfect, sustainability models, purely because we have been cut off and we have been isolated and left to think for ourselves for so many years. So because of that, we built our own immune system.
Right.
We have built our own, sustainability models. Yeah. It's just that it's now because we are open to so much of information that's there outside to different medias. We feel that there is something that's missing.
Right.
But it's not that, it's just that I think we are just getting a little kind of worn off with the old systems and all of that. And some systems need to go, which are not really needed and required. But there's a lot of things which the community offers, which at EcoStream, we're just following them.
Right.
We are following them, like spreading it out right now. That's all.
Right. So, how do you think the states up north, towards the mountains, towards the Himalayas, basically, how do you think they approach design differently from how the mainland of the country looks at designers? What's the principal difference that differentiates the Seven Sisters states from how they approach design as part of conservation?
I think from a point of view of design as a profession, maybe not much. Yeah, but when you look at from problem solving point of view, then I think their approach has always been very hands-on, and a very community based approach.
Right.
So from a problem solving point of view, I think there are lots of examples, where there's been a lot of community initiated approaches, and they are far ahead of they are way ahead of their times, in terms of those designs and those models. But from a profession point of view, I think we are way behind. Because when I say differentiate, that is because then you look at the profession point of view, it really has to somewhere translate into some sort of an economic activity or economic activity. To contribute there. So that is we have not been able to really. We are way behind. We need to do a lot of catching up. But from a problem solving point of approach, I think we are, and not only in the Seven Sisters, I think India in general, I think actually has that very good, problem solving ability. It's basically at a very micro industries level. We, in a lot of places, people call it jugaad and all that. Frugal innovation and stuff like that, but I think it's a better understanding of the problem that people have and how they can solve those issues in that context with the given resources that they have.
Right. I'd request the participants to send in questions if you have any while we carry on with the conversation. You can send in your questions in the chat window so that I'd be able to put forth to Mr. Sona. So, so going ahead, do you think the mainland is able to borrow anything from the approach that you're saying, say, the Seven Sisters again? or say the Himalayan approach of looking at design and conservation in any way? Or if it is not, then what do you think is the gap that needs to be filled in to bridge, the divide that is there?
I think more than anything else, I think it needs to communicate better. The interstate thing that
Right.
is there, we need to communicate better. Because I think there is a lot of opportunities when you really look at interstate, economic models or knowledge sharing and all that. There are a lot of things which are so useful and applicable in the Northeast, but it's not really applicable in the plain areas and in the towards
Right.
the
Right.
cities and the larger cities. But
Right.
definitely, I think when you really look at it from one good learning that you really can have, and I think that's there. Wherever you can find tribal communities in the plains,
Hmm.
or any community-based, organizations or villages downstream.
Hmm.
I think you will find that thing of the how they are very, very well integrated with, and their natural surroundings and how well they use the natural resources.
Hmm.
I think that's something which I think, I wouldn't say mainstream India, but the more of the urban, areas or the urban, cities and all probably can learn how to use resources and how to conserve resources and how to
Right.
value those things. I think that thing, I think, basically in the sense, what I mean to say is here we are very culturally, religiously, spiritually, emotionally, we are so connected with our natural surroundings.
Hmm.
And, the codependence is too much,
But isn't that a
so
good thing in a way?
it's a very, it's a good thing. That's what I'm saying, that in the urban areas,
Hmm.
this kind of codependence actually has to be more,
Hmm.
you know I feel in the urban areas it's very disconnected.
Right.
There's not much of that. In fact, the interesting thing is that that they at times they feel the lack of it,
Hmm.
or they don't find it easier way, so they come to the hills and everywhere for vacations and to kind of rejuvenate or
Right.
reconnect with all that. But I think it's not really about reconnecting, rejuvenating. It's more about taking it back. You come to the mountains,
Exactly. Hmm.
but you take all these good practices and great practices and take it to your urban environment and you build those ecosystems also around in
Right.
urban. So that's one thing I think that the mountains can actually offer towards
Do you
the.
think do you think there's this is a classic case of having say an inverse proportionality wherein say you say that say in Sikkim profession wise maybe you could take away a lot from how the mainland operates, and vis-a-vis the mainland not being able to be culturally rooted, and they them need to be taken away from places where people are more settled, towards the northeast side. So do you think trying to gain trying to gain a ground in one part of it will affect the other part? I'm not sure if I'm clear. Put
Can
it
you
more clearly. Am I audible?
are you audible? I couldn't understand the question.
I'm
Sorry.
sorry. Yeah, yeah. So I'm trying to say that you earlier mentioned that a state like Sikkim, it does very well in terms of conservation with its attitude of conservation, the communities there, people there, the approach to life there in general. It does very well in terms of conservation. But then when it comes to the part of being professionally as successful as the mainland, that's where there is a lacuna is what you were saying. So if you say the mainland needs to borrow the cultural ethos of say Sikkim, do you think it'll be a double-edged sword wherein the mainland might also falter in getting the profession part of it right, or inversely, say a state like Sikkim going down if it going down in terms of its cultural ethos or the way it looks at conservation if it tries to adapt something from the mainland?
I think that some if I understand that, I think somewhere there's a lot of like I was a part of one discussion recently on Gangtok's master plan, and a lot of people talked about before also a lot of politicians have talked about how to make the vision is to make Sikkim like Switzerland, and Sikkim like Singapore, or Sikkim like some other country, which has great economic model, there's development and blah blah blah, all that. And then that's what I think the mistake is, say that you can somewhere borrow some best practices and some thing, but you can't replicate it. It has to be even if I take up a economic model, say from Bombay, and you want to bring it to Sikkim, let's say create a film industry or something like that in the
Right.
mountains.
Mm.
It's very different, right? So how the dynamic and all works.
Mm.
Although we may have scenic places and it may look like we can shoot any kind of a film out here and all that, but
Right.
but the films are not made like that, right?
Mm. Mm.
So somewhere down the line, I think what goes wrong is basically when we see something working very well somewhere,
Mm.
we try to replicate the same model to somewhere
Mm.
else.
Right.
That's when things go wrong.
Right.
The idea here is what I'm trying to say is that what one needs to really do is that you understand exactly how communities in the mountains have actually connected with nature,
Mm.
and then you find in the cities you find your own way of how you probably want to connect with nature.
Right.
It could just be one pot.
Mm. Mm.
It could just be one plant that you've been carrying from one city to another city to another city to another city
Mm.
as you keep moving on, or it could be some one habit of not using single use plastics.
Right.
Or it could be just this one thing about how you would want everywhere where you want to go, you would initiate a community-based activity.
Mm.
Whether it's cleaning up your society or your buildings or waste collection systems or something or other,
Right.
so the things can't be replicated. You have to find your own way of connecting with it, but these things can always be looked as case studies and as examples.
Got it. Got it. So we have another question from our attendee, Rajdeep S. So Rajdeep asks he asked your thoughts about amalgamation of architecture, interiors, and mobility systems to enhance mountainous connectivity. So using bioarchitecture to explore earthquake and landslide resistant structures. So he basically asks you about using bioarchitecture to explore earthquake and landslide resistant structures. So what are your thoughts about it?
I think one thing is that in the mountainous region, I think we always had I think a lot. The earthquake has not been a recent phenomenon, right? It's been a thing which has been there throughout centuries, and I think architecture in the mountains region have been built out of those experiences. Not only from earthquakes, but from harsh weather conditions, landslides, floods.
Flashbacks, yeah.
Yeah, floods and invasions, from outside, places, and wars and many other things. So that ways, I think we've always mountains region, like I said, because it's been cut off from so many other places too, is because of the geographic situation. We ended up using a lot of our bioresources, whether it's to do with nettle fiber or any natural fiber to make a clothing, or whether it's architecture, food, anything, you name it. So we've always used our natural resources that ways. And I think the problem is that, that entire knowledge thing that was there, it never continued.
Right.
It was abruptly stopped by commerce.
Right.
Suddenly somebody landed up saying, let's just make RCC buildings, and then you completely cut off the community-based initiative of building things together and using local resources, local skill, local knowledge to build.
Right.
Because it became a thing of convenience, right? If you had money, you could just buy those natural materials and just get people to build your building.
Right.
So it just, there was a like a cut. So of course there, if you really start investing in a bioarchitecture and resources and everything, I think we'll be much better off in terms of our architectural needs and our needs as a city, how we are growing. Definitely.
Right, right. So Adarsh has here a question. Adarsh asks, do you think craft-based design has a commercially viable future? And if yes, what are the challenges specifically pertaining to craft-based products?
I think crafts and everything. I think it's anyways it cannot be it cannot survive without a commercial thing, because when the whole thing of crafts and anything handmade
Hmm.
started, I think it started with our own local consumption and a local need and a local requirement, or a localized
Hmm.
uh, requirement. But
Right,
the point is that today, I think if you really look at how, if you take away the whole cultural and aesthetic aspect of crafts and look
hmm.
at a more of a utilitarian application of crafts, I
Right,
think there is a much better scope of building up a strong economic model and a commercial model, and it
right,
has to be like that, because the thing is that how many craft artisans are known in their villages from their professions.
right.
Like, a teacher is a profession,
Hmm.
architect is a profession, a doctor
Hmm.
is a profession, but a craftsperson is never recognized as a profession. And the
Right,
reason why that is because it's completely cut off from the commercial economic model. And
right,
when you want to have an inclusion of commercial and economic model, means that I need to have a sustained income every month.
hmm.
Yeah, that needs to go to the bank account, and the bank
Hmm.
at some point in time should recognize that as a clear source of income and should be
Hmm.
able to give the person a loan.
Hmm.
But that's not happening right now. Most of the craft artisans don't have bank accounts.
Hmm.
It's just because in the last 10, 15 years that actually artisans really now have a bank account, because of the central schemes that mandated that everybody needs to have a central account, sorry,
Hmm.
like a bank account.
Bank account. Yeah.
Yeah, because until that point in time, it is all loose thing. No? You just give
Hmm.
them cash, and then by the time that person reaches home, that
Hmm.
100 rupees become 10 rupees, because he's paying everybody that he's taken money from.
Right, right,
So somewhere, it's never had a very strong hold as a profession. I mean, there are a lot of organizations which have been attempting to do this over the past 50, 60 years. But the length and breadth of this country is so huge, and the complexities is so grave that, eventually, we started putting all the eggs in one basket and making one policy. And that's where
right,
things gone wrong.
right.
So definitely it needs to have, money. The challenges are, I mean, it's from person to person, village to village. It's that
Hmm.
complex,
Right,
because you cannot take it like a factory system.
right.
You can't take a factory system 9 to 5. You work and you'll get this.
Hmm.
Social systems. When you look at enterprises, social enterprises, it doesn't work like that.
Hmm.
So those are the very challenging things. How to kind of make it economically sustainable, but it can be done.
Right, right. So is there a homogeneity in the mountainous regions with respect to how craft is approached in comparison to how it is approached in the other parts of the country?
Yeah, yes and no, both. I think, because main reasons also is that, say if in Sikkim, if you say one craft cluster,
Hmm.
if you define a cluster, it will hardly be 60 people.
Right,
Now the same thing, if you go to Assam and say one cluster, that one cluster will be not less than 300 to 500 people.
right.
If you go to Karnataka, Madhya Pradesh, and all those Bihar and other places, one cluster will be not less than 2,000, 3,000 people.
Hmm.
So sometimes what happens is that, at the end of the day, it's led to commerce, productions, and wholesale, and lot of
Right,
lot of commerce is attached to it.
right.
So we really have to kind of really, I mean, there are a lot of things which are homogeneous, but
Mm.
there are a lot of times where we really have to innovate as per the situation.
Right.
And it's a very complex thing. We've just been discussing this thing. There's an ongoing workshop in my office on bamboo crafts,
Mm.
and just been thinking, because the kind of people who have come here are all graduates.
Okay.
you
Okay.
know they're all graduates, and just been trying to understand exactly now how is that happening, how this suddenly there's an interest amongst the graduates to take up crafts,
Right.
which are mostly looked at from mostly the craft sectors like this, very poor, illiterate.
Mm.
That's a general stereotype.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
But then we are now getting, like, because Sikkim's illiteracy rate is very high.
Right.
And now the kind of younger generations who are coming are probably, you probably get graduates, and that's what I'm now saying, that is this now another level of thing, because then that changes the game again.
Right.
You're getting more educated people into the craft sector, means that there are the opportunity areas just widens up then.
Right.
So yeah.
Okay. There are a lot of students in the attendees today, and a lot of designers who have just started up or
Hmm.
want to start up. So, what is your opinion, or what is your advice to them, if anyone of them is trying to, or even considering or planning to set shop in a place that is completely alien to them, uh, culturally alien to them, like say Sikkim or Arunachal Pradesh. There's always been a complaint from the Seven Sister States, which is in fact true also, that there's a huge cultural gap from the mainland. It's an ongoing complaint, and it is as legitimate as it can get. So, do you think people moving in from the mainland, designers and aspirants moving in from the mainland to these states to set shop, will help in a way to bridge the gap between what is seen as a cultural disparity?
Well, first of all, they need to get a thick jacket, shawls, and some really warm clothes. So basically, in general, I think, when somebody wants to not only look at crafts, but any design as a designpreneur,
Hmm.
want to start on your own,
Hmm.
my suggestion to you is to not do it alone.
Hmm.
Find a partner, or find teams, and do it, with a team, because it's, as it is, starting any design initiative on your own in India is still very challenging.
Hmm.
As a freelancer, probably you'll be well off, much better,
Hmm.
and all that, because you're looking for yourself, you're taking care of yourself.
Right.
But when you look at it from an entrepreneur point of view, where you're creating more jobs and you are going into this thing of creating more employment, and creating a certain market value of your brand and of your thing, I think it's not one person's job.
Right.
Need to have partners to
Hmm.
come together, who understand each other, their differences as well as their strong points, you
Right.
know and say that we're going to stick with each other for at least 5 years.
Right.
We can tolerate each other, not murder each other, and can take in all the kind of feedback and all. Then I think you should get into it, because when you look at design entrepreneurship and etc., there's a lot of investments that eventually
Hmm.
one has to get into, and then loans and all those things are there, and
Hmm.
there's all those things are a matter of trust.
Hmm.
You need to trust each other, that each one of us can sit together, and each one's decision uh, you know can be supported, or can be very rationally argued with. If you're that kind of a person, I think you should get into it. Otherwise, I've been now very careful about mentoring younger people, because I think they have very short attention span.
Right.
They want quick results. They're
Hmm.
non-committed in that sense. They're not
Hmm.
committed in sense not to work. They're very
Hmm.
committed to work, but they're not want to be committed into some sort of a partnerships or long-term thing. They want to explore more,
Right.
travel,
Right.
more,
Right.
more things, you know, understand more things, you know,
Hmm.
because there's so much of things available, you know, all around that you want to try out everything, right? So with the younger lot, I think it's if you're very well settled in, you know, one place, all of you, then go for this thing. Otherwise, you know, be very careful, you know, with your finances, at least when you start starting off.
Right. Right. Yeah. So Adarsh asks, what is your vision for La Sikkim?
So the thing, vision for La Sikkim is to, you know, create capabilities and capacities in the Himalayan belt.
Right.
You know, what I mean to say that is that, you know, when you look at now, when I say the creative mountain economy model, is not only related to the craft sector. You know,
Hmm.
it's related to music,
Hmm.
it's related to all sorts of creative activities.
Right.
You know, see, in a mountainous regions, no, we wake up with, you know, beautiful aesthetics around us.
Right.
You know, the even if you
Hmm.
see a foggy day and all, you find beauty in it. You
Hmm.
know, or
Hmm.
something or the other, we are surrounded by some great aesthetics.
Hmm.
So what happens is naturally everybody becomes very, very skilled in something or the other. If you look at
Right.
right around the time when Indian Idol has started, or any of those reality TV singing
Right.
or dance competitions started, the top 10 guys are all from the mountains.
Absolutely.
हमारे पास गाने बजाने और नाचने के लिए फुर्सत ही फुर्सत
Absolutely.
है.
Which is a good thing.
Yeah, it's a good thing. So I think that's also one of the reasons why I think, you know, the mountains regions, I think you have that, you know, capacity, sort of capabilities. Now we have to build the capacities around it.
Right.
You know,
Right.
we have to kind of see, you know, what kind of creative platforms can be created to kind of like for these different individuals to, you know, grow.
Hmm.
So that's what Lars focus has been right now, or
Right.
will be in the next, you know, to 15, 20 years.
Can you tell us a little bit about your tea brand?
The tea brand.
Yes.
Yeah. So what happened was that, you know, in between I just figured out that, you know, just kind of like concentrating on bamboo products in itself will not really work out.
Hmm.
So what was happening is in Sikkim, you know, it's one of the you know, best tourism destinations. You know, not only India but in the world. So the tourist thing is growing and growing and growing, and
Right.
with that, you know, a lot of waste was being created through packaging.
Hmm.
And there's another. So that was the problem area. There's an opportunity area was that uh, that, you know, the tourists would really, you know, take most of the things as souvenir as tea or local.
Hmm.
Temiti
Hmm.
is a very well-known brand and is a very good tea. So
Right.
a lot of people would take away, you know, tea packets with them.
Right.
So that's when I figured out that that's already a selling product.
Hmm.
So we started collaborating with the tree growers, the government of Sikkim, and we
Mhm.
bought tea from them, a certain quantity,
Right.
and kind of integrated that into my tea brand called Tea, which is
Right.
basically has zero waste packaging in the form of a bamboo basket or a
Okay.
container. So
Okay.
that container can be used as, you know, once a tea is done, can
Hmm.
be reused as a, you know, to keep your accessories or jewelry for women or your stationaries. It can also be used as a tea stainer
Hmm.
because of this. The weave of the bamboo is such that, you know, you could use it for to stain tea,
Right.
and they're like 10, 15 other use. So basically, we introduced zero waste packaging to
Hmm.
the tea brand.
Right.
So yeah, so that's tea
How big is the presence all over the country? So, I
of
mean, is
the.
it available for people? Yeah, of the tea brand.
So it's a single estate tea thing, and also the area cover is not much, but it's basically, you know, most of the auction tea is all you know, sold abroad.
Hmm.
So it's not really there in the because there's a certain small percentage of it is actually available for retail. So
Right.
you don't really get so much outside. But if you see, most of the Sikkim tea is bought by all European brands, and they kind of like, you know, take the tea and put it in own
Repackaging. Yeah.
packaging and then sell it off.
Right. Right. Okay. Yeah. So Bhumika Sukhadia here has an interesting question. She asks, do the toddlers, the super young ones in your region, relate to the natural environment, the culture, the craft, the skills in a specific way? Because she says we are seeing a lot of second and third generation craft families move away from their existing businesses. So,
Yeah, I think that is a global phenomenon, right? So
hmm,
it's happening in Sikkim also. I can't deny that.
hmm,
I feel that somewhere I think I have a lot of hope with the younger generation now. You know,
hmm,
purely because I've probably seen some really good examples
right,
of initiatives, and most of these guys are actually very woke. It's just that I think they can't sustain the interest area for far too long.
right.
It's
Hmm,
just because they get bored too easily. So, but I feel that that uh, I think if I had to bet my money, I would probably bet my money on the younger lot. You know, because I feel that that this lot will is has the ability to think.
right.
It's just that I think decision making and many other things, I think that is where I think they need to kind of like pull up the socks. But I think they have great thinking abilities. They can rationalize things. They are not the guys who will be like taken away by just hearsay, or somebody's telling them, or कोई उसके कान फूक देगा, or ये
Hmm,
नहीं है.
hmm,
They'll question things. And I like that about because I think from a design point of view, from a problem solving point of view, that's the fundamental thing that you need to do, right?
right, right.
So I feel that while there's a lot of speculations about how these generations are, but I think
Hmm.
I'm very hopeful.
But then it's a very interesting paradox to keep a watch at.
Keeper.
It's a very interesting paradox to keep a watch at, is what I'm saying.
Yeah,
The younger generation. Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah. So Snehal here asks, "Hey Sonam, greatly inspiring journey. What scope or intersection do you see of digital or UX design in EcoStream and Mountain Economy?"
I think we are already doing that. We had Himadri Patel from NIT Ahmedabad. She had come and we worked on a app for UI UX project, and we have worked on a app for healthcare assistance for the mountains regions.
Right.
Because most of these regions, and actually they still don't have access to healthcare. It's not because the government are not doing much. It's just that geographically it becomes very difficult for anybody to access them. And
Right.
it's also a thing of like mostly it's like the preventive healthcare systems which actually are failing.
Hmm,
you know,
hmm,
and that needs to be in check. So we developed a product which actually was looking at that. So UI, UX, and AI, all those things. In fact, we are looking at AI interventions craft also. In
mhm.
handicrafts and crafts and all those things also. We are trying to see where what the role of crafts is in the form of AI. You
Right.
know, so how can these things actually can be integrated? Because the thing is that AI and all this the machine learning, many of these things actually have not been understood well. It's just been like again stereotype
Hmm,
in
hmm.
that manner. So we are exploring all of those things. Yeah.
Right. Right. So that brings us to the next question. Anna asks, as a designer working with craftsmen, that are what are some of the major challenges you face? How do the craftsmen respond to the idea of working with designers in your case?
I think the major challenge is actually trust. Uh, whether they really trust you that by this collaboration they can actually see a future.
Right.
Because we have never done this process before, no? So we don't know. There's no example already that it's a successful model.
Hmm,
So there is a lot of this trust issues, in the sense that whether sticking with this model, whether I'll be successful, I'll be able to send my children to really good, give them good education, give my
hmm,
parents good healthcare facilities, will be able to meet up with my aspirations or not. you
hmm,
know that's what the thing. And the other challenge is that most of these artisans actually they have stopped dreaming.
Hmm.
You know, they feel that our reality is this.
Hmm.
Let's just be happy with whatever is coming our way, and this is good for surviving.
Hmm.
So they've stopped dreaming in the sense they've
Right.
stopped thinking that I dream that one day I'll have this.
Right.
Right? So somewhere at the end of the day, I think it's for me it's very very challenging to convince somebody that just by doing what they're doing right now
Right.
would would basically like end all of us in a very good future. Yeah, because I myself, when I'm doing that, all I can do is I can have some self belief and confidence in what I'm saying and what I'm doing.
Right.
But beyond that, I can't really make somebody push them into believing me, that this can happen.
Hmm.
So that's one challenging thing, because design in itself is a people centric kind of thing. It's a very social thing, right?
Right. Right.
So in today's time and age, trust is one thing which is very rare.
Right.
There's always this doubt, maybe he's cheating, maybe he's doing this, maybe he's just using me to do something. So that thing, it's a very complicated thing, the human relationships that are there.
Hmm.
If I was a boss and I had you say, okay, this is your salary, make me this many things,
Hmm.
then it works differently, like a
Right.
factory system.
Hmm.
But I don't operate like that.
But has it become any easier since you've started?
Yeah. I think every day it gets better and better and better and better.
Right.
Not really the situation, but us dealing with the situation.
Yes.
The
Got it.
situation
Got
gets worse and worse and worse and worse.
it.
But we just get better at dealing with these situations, because what happens is that we all are into it together, and then we end up coming with some solution or the other.
Right.
So there's no
Right.
one permanent solution to it. You have to work on it every day,
Hmm.
and we will, of course, will reach somewhere in a very positive note.
Right. Right. Yeah. So finally, Sonam, I was going through your profile again. I got to know that you started this initiative called Working from the Himalayas.
Hmm.
All through last year, while we were all stuck between four walls in a big room or a small room, in whatever size of room we
Yeah.
were able to manage ourselves to get in. Uh, uh, what is it about this venture that about this idea to start this venture that actually got you out to?
So there were this I was just kind of like observing what was going on
Hmm.
uh, in Sikkim itself and globally also, right? I mean, the global pandemic, the impact of it to the economy and everything
Hmm.
was, I mean, well known and well documented and all that.
Hmm. Hmm.
But then I'm trying to understand that, in a very speculative kind of a thing, trying to think, what if this doesn't end?
Hmm.
What if we end up being in a work from home mode forever?
Hmm.
Professionals, the student community, everybody's work from home.
Right.
Because I was very used to work from home scenario, people in the mountains, because artisans, everybody, they work from home only. They've been working from home for God knows when, and we have been isolated and quarantined in this part of the world forever. So these things
Right.
were not very new to
Right.
us. So my point was that now that the whole world is in that situation, they understand
Hmm.
that situation and all. Now, what do we do with that? And in Sikkim, what was happening is that a lot of hoteliers and a lot of people into stakeholders in tourism sector were suffering.
Hmm.
Like all the stakeholders all over the world is suffering. But
Right.
in that thing, we saw an opportunity also where we said, okay, how about you're working from home, but how about making home the Himalayas?
Right.
So because all you probably would need is internet and electricity and uh, lifestyle, and besides that we had clean air, clean water, great environment, peaceful environment,
Hmm.
uh, a government which was actually on their toes, dealing with the COVID scenario.
Hmm.
So it was like a lovely narrative script in front
Right.
of. And then that's why we kind of like started collaborating with all the hoteliers and all. Say that, like, let's say you had 15 lakh tourists coming to Sikkim last year.
Hmm.
How about looking at about 22,000 to 30,000 people coming to Sikkim and staying for much longer time?
Hmm.
You know, so the work from Himalayas started like that. You know, we said that, you know, let's create a co-working, co-living and a co-creation space where it's targeted towards freelancers and small startups and what do you call the student community. You know, colleges are not a thing, right? There's a design colleges and everything is all shut. People in their final year projects are not being able to meet the vendors, make prototypes, etc. So
Right.
we thought of, you know, creating those workshop facilities and everything, you know, and where students can come and they get the self-sponsored projects, you know, and they can, you know, figure out things. So
Right.
Book from Himalayas, basically it started like that.
Right.
And we started getting people to come in. And the best thing about this entire situation, we thought that we'll only be concentrating on hotels and stuff like that, homestays.
Hmm.
But eventually, a lot of people started asking us whether they wanted to move here with their families. You know,
Interesting.
because in Mumbai and other places and all that, no, the old people and all are, and the children, they are not able to go out and play in the thing. They are not able to do their
Hmm.
walks.
Hmm.
All that because of building society में सारा trap हो जाता है ना.
Hmm. Hmm.
They
Hmm.
were then asking us for apartments and, you know, whether they can, you know, have an independent house where they can, you know, sit there, because, you know, we've got a nice environment, you know.
Right. Right.
We thought that why not just capitalize on that. So
Yeah.
work in Himalayas actually started like that. Yeah.
So did you have to promote it at all, or because of having millions of people who are famished like myself, to be running around mountains, fantasizing about breathing fresh air, after say 10 to 12 months of staying in a home, in a closed room, they wanted to get out. How has it been working for you so far, in terms of crowds coming in?
No, so far I think it's been great. I think we kind of like, you know, the government of Sikkim started to they were very proactive in terms of, you know, starting SOPs and all for hotels and stuff like that, and putting policies in place, safeguarding, because these things and all will even reinforce and make things much better for a lot of people coming from outside, because then for them they'll be assured that there's a safe environment.
Right.
Yeah, the way they can, it's not only fresh air, this and that, but, you know, the pandemic is also being considered and all of that.
Absolutely.
So they introduced travel cards. They could, you know, there are a lot of interesting things that they're doing. So because of which we kind of didn't release the website. So but we had already released it on Instagram.
Okay.
We had put up one post on Instagram, and suddenly we got a lot of inquiries, and we couldn't say no to it because we already said yes, we are opening all that. So we had to say yes to that, and then we kind of like shut the entry thing for, because now once this you know, all this government is very clear in terms of the SOPs and, you know, all of that, having hotels to operate in full capacity, because right now yeah, it's a very limited kind of a thing, you know. You cannot have jam packed hotels, you know.
Right.
So we need to kind of figure out a way where, you know, the whole safety aspects of the co-living individuals are being well taken care of. Their back, it shouldn't be like, you know, if say in one hotel they're like even in one case, then the entire hotel gets shut down.
Right. Right.
You know, so these things have to be really worked out well, so that, you know, everyone's safe, they enjoy the stay here, they have a very productive year as professionals, you know. So that's what the intent is with the work with Himalayas.
Right. Right. Yeah. So on a parting note, thank you very much for giving us a perspective as to what is happening in the Himalayan region with respect to design, with respect to sustainability and craftsmanship and crafts also. So thank you for giving us time. We've almost spoken for about an hour now. It was a pleasure to have you on our webinar today. And on behalf of ADI Hyderabad, we'd like to thank you so much.
Thank you.
We thank all the participants for attending today's Design Stories webinar with ADI Hyderabad, and we hope you've had some interesting takeaways from the session. For access to a year-long engagement of more such invigorating talks, webinars, and live events pertaining to the various facets of design, please become a member of ADI. If you're not an ADI member yet, do visit our website www.adi.org.in and become a member today. Our student membership costs just rupees 500. So that's that. Thank you, everyone, and have a safe.
Yeah, thanks, guys. Bye.
Thank you. Thank you, Sonam.